You can't ignore this any longer.
This is my land, not yours!
The law says otherwise. Now sign.
Let's all just calm down.
They stole my ranch. The foreclosure notice is nailed to my gate like a bounty poster, and I'm staring at 70 years of Thornfield's sweat turned into paper.
Mr. Thornfield, I'm Vivian Blackwood, president of Sunset Meadows HOA. Your property now falls under our jurisdiction. You must comply.
Your subdivision wasn't even here when my granddad bought this land in 1952. This is ranch land, not a gated brochure.
Boundary realignment is approved. You're in our community now. The rules apply.
You're accusing me of violations I never committed: noise, unsightly hay bales, unauthorized equipment. This is harassment.
The fines are real. $500 a day until you fix it.
Fix what? My cattle, my tractor, my life. You're weaponizing paperwork.
You will pay the special assessment, $47,000, or we proceed.
You're trying to steal a legacy with forged authority. I won't let you.
Then you leave me no choice. The auction is set, and your ranch will be sold.
The morning the ranch was taken, the world looked exactly the same as it always had: cold air, pale sky, the distant sound of cattle shifting in the pens. But the paper nailed to the gate changed everything. A foreclosure notice, stamped with authority and finality, as if the law itself had decided that Thornfield blood no longer belonged to the land it had nurtured. Rex Thornfield stood there in the 4:47 a.m. frost, diesel engine coughing blue smoke, boots sinking into hard ground, and felt the weight of a legacy turning into a legal sentence. He had returned to this place to heal, not to fight. Yet the fight arrived anyway, and it came with a smile and a clipboard. The ranch had been Thornfield land since 1952, when Ezra Thornfield bought 3 500-acre parcels of high desert for what a new sedan would cost today. Ezra's hands were the hands of the Depression era, calloused, stubborn, capable of turning sagebrush into fences, barns, and hope. He built the first dirt roads, dug the irrigation ditches, and raised a herd that became the heartbeat of the valley. In 1978, his son took over, modernized the barns, expanded the herd, and raised his own children with the same grit. Rex had grown up driving dirt roads, learning life behind the wheel of a borrowed bulldozer. He met Sarah at the county fair, where she stood beside his prize bull and called him gentle. It was the kind of soft remark that made a man think he was being tamed, and maybe he was. They married, raised 2 children, and watched the ranch become a home where laughter chased calves and seasons marked the passage of time. Emma, the older daughter, grew into a corporate shark in Denver. Jake, the son, wore camo somewhere in the Middle East. Sarah was the anchor, the reason Rex believed the future could be calm. For a while, the plan worked. The ranch was a place of rhythm again, dawn light on the barns, the steady work of feeding and mending, the quiet comfort of knowing that the earth didn't care about grief, it only cared about being tended. Then Sunset Meadows Estates arrived like a storm with a smile. A California developer had decided the valley needed luxury homes, and the eastern border of Rex's land was suddenly a gold mine. 2 miles of winter grass became half-acre parcels, $300,000 each. McMansions rose like weeds after rain, their beige roofs and manicured lawns invading the horizon. Vivian Blackwood appeared at his gate in white linen, clipboard in hand, nails painted red like warning lights. She introduced herself as president of the HOA and spoke as if the ranch was a paperwork error she intended to correct. She used terms like boundary realignment and jurisdiction, and her smile had the sharpness of a blade. Within 48 hours, certified letters began arriving, violations for noise, for equipment, for hay bales that had been stored the same way for decades. Every letter threatened $500 daily fines until he complied. The first real blow came with a special assessment, $47,000 for road repairs and runoff, a bill he had no say in for work he hadn't caused. The roads were built by his granddad. The irrigation was older than the subdivision itself. When he demanded proof, the HOA could produce nothing. No survey, no county approval, no legal boundary change. But the letters kept coming, the fines kept stacking, and the pressure kept growing. It wasn't just a fight over land anymore. It was a battle over whether a small community could be turned into a weapon against its own founders. In the days that followed, the harassment escalated into sabotage. His fences were cut in clean, professional lines, and his cattle wandered into HOA common areas. The next morning, the HOA called the sheriff and the news, painting him as a danger to children and a threat to the community. He was out there in the same cold dawn, hammering posts back into the ground, doing honest work while his reputation was being destroyed. And then came the certified notice, intent to foreclose. 30 days to pay or lose everything, and the realization hit him that the fight had become larger than one man's grief. It was a test of whether a community could be twisted into a weapon against its own founders for good. The foreclosure notice was meant to break him, but it did something else. It sharpened his focus. Rex Thornfield had spent his life in law, devouring HOA regulations and boundary disputes the way others devoured novels. He understood the machinery, and he understood the hunger of people who pretended to serve a community while they fed on it. The notice was a declaration of war, and he began to treat it as a case file, not a tragedy. He documented everything, every letter, every photograph, every drive-by inspection, every insult disguised as concern. He labeled a folder HOA harassment and watched it thicken like evidence in a courtroom. He walked the fences, checked the posts, verified the integrity of every gate. He did the work of a rancher, but his mind worked like a prosecutor. When the fence was cut, he did not react with anger alone. He set up trail cameras and he waited. The next morning, the footage revealed what he suspected. Someone had cut the fence with the precision of a professional. The cattle wandered into the subdivision, and within hours, the HOA president was on the phone with 911, painting a story of danger and chaos. The local news arrived, cameras rolling, and the narrative shifted away from the real crime. Rex was the villain in the story of his own land, hammering posts, while a camera lens followed the version of events that served the HOA. But fate has a way of turning on people who think they are untouchable. The trail cameras captured a teenager on the driveway, moving with the guilt of someone who knew he was doing something wrong. Marcus Blackwood, the HOA president's nephew, was caught in the act. When Rex reviewed the evidence, the boy confessed. Vivian had paid him $500 to cut the fence, calling it community service. The confession was a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the corruption underneath the pristine HOA facade. Rex offered Marcus a choice: come clean or face felony charges. The boy chose the first option, and that choice brought another storm. Marcus arrived at the ranch with his father, shame etched into his face, and Rex realized the situation was worse than he thought. Vivian was not just bullying him, she was orchestrating a campaign. The HOA had become a machine designed to strip land from people who stood in the way of profit. The foreclosure process moved fast after that. The HOA filed a lien for $47,000, claiming emergency road repairs and runoff mitigation. The number was arbitrary, the justification thin, and the timing suspicious. It was a tactic designed to create panic, to force a sale before Rex could mount a full legal defense. The notice gave him 30 days. 30 days to save a legacy built over decades. 30 days to prove that the HOA had no legal right to his land. Rex gathered his family. Emma flew in from Denver, her corporate legal mind relentless. Jasper, his old law partner, the man who made a career out of breaking HOA schemes, joined the fight. Dale Morrison, an ex-detective turned private investigator, started digging into the HOA's history. Janet, a title expert, pulled property records and traced the ownership of every shell company connected to Sunset Meadows. They became a war room, a sanctuary from the panic. They discovered the first clue in the auction itself. Only two bidders showed up, Marcus Blackwood and a Shadri LLC. Marcus won, and the deed was filed. But the LLC was a shell, and the shell led back to Vivian. She had used family connections and fake entities to hide her involvement, turning the HOA into a personal profit machine. It was not just his ranch that had been targeted. 3 other families had lost land in the same way. Each property ended up in the hands of the board or its associates. As the days passed, the evidence grew. The boundary adjustment that had pulled his land into the HOA was signed by a surveyor who had been dead for 2 years. The HOA owed hundreds of thousands in back taxes, and the records showed a pattern of tax fraud and false reporting. There were forged signatures, bribes, and fake documents. It was racketeering dressed up as civic duty, and Rex held the smoking gun. But the most powerful weapon was not the evidence itself. It was the law. Arizona had a provision allowing the creation of agricultural preservation districts with eminent domain power. If Rex could establish the Barty Agricultural District, the state could legally buy out the subdivision lots for a fixed, low price. It was a reversal of the power Vivian had used against him. He filed the paperwork, and the legal machinery began to turn. While the HOA tried to paint him as a menace, he was building a legal fortress. Vivian responded with desperation. She launched fake health inspector notices, false liens, and even attempted to have Rex disbarred. She tried to turn the county against him, using paid witnesses and scared officials, but Dale recorded her on tape discussing bribes and plotting to clear out every rancher for a $40 million payday from Phoenix developers. The tape was the final piece, the moment when the mask slipped and the true intent was exposed. Rex walked into the county commission meeting with boxes of evidence, cameras rolling, and a calm that came from knowing the truth was on his side. Vivian took the microphone and recited her script: property values, safety, pollution. But when Rex presented the forged signature, the bribery transcript, and the tax fraud documents, the room shifted. Deputies moved in, and Vivian was arrested. The Barty Agricultural Preservation District exercised eminent domain over Sunset Meadows, and the subdivision was bought out at the fixed rate. The county watched as truth unfolded. The arrest of Vivian Blackwood did not erase the months of pressure, but it changed the direction of the story. When deputies led her away, the valley seemed to exhale. People who had been too afraid to speak finally looked up from their lawns and their paperwork. The rancher who had been painted as a menace became a symbol of what happens when someone refuses to be bullied into surrender. Rex Thornfield stood in the same cold dawn that had once felt like a graveyard, but now it felt like a threshold to something new. The legal system moved with the slow certainty of a river carving stone. Vivian's case became a public spectacle, and the evidence Rex's team had gathered was impossible to ignore. The forged signature of a dead surveyor, the tax fraud records, the shell companies, the bribes caught on tape, all of it formed a chain that led straight to the HOA president's door. The court did not treat it as a petty neighborhood dispute. It treated it as organized corruption. Vivian was sentenced to 3 years and ordered $500,000 in restitution. But the most important victory was not the punishment. It was the reversal of the theft. The Barty Agricultural Preservation District exercised its power, and Sunset Meadows was forced to sell the lots at the fixed price of $600 per parcel. The McMansions that had risen like weeds were suddenly worth less than the cost of a fence post. Families who had been exploited were given the chance to walk away without the crushing debt that had been imposed on them. The land that had been stolen was finally returned to the people who belonged to it. Rex reclaimed the ranch, but he did not return to the same life. The grief that had driven him back to the hills was still there, but it had changed shape. It became a mission. He used the settlement to found the Barty Community Foundation, a legal aid organization for families facing corrupt HOAs. It started with a handful of cases, then grew to 62 and counting. People came from neighboring counties with stories of intimidation, fake liens, forged documents, and board members who treated their power like a weapon. The ranch itself became a living classroom. City kids arrived in school buses, eyes wide at the sight of cattle and open sky. They learned to rope calves, mend fences, and respect the work that builds a life. Emma returned to run a law office on the property, offering free consultations on Fridays. Jake came back from the army and began teaching local youth about discipline and responsibility. The Thornfield land became a place where the past and the future met, where the stubbornness of Ezra's generation was not just remembered, but lived. The state legislature took notice. The Thornfield case had become a warning sign, a story that spread through legal circles and community meetings. Lawmakers drafted what became known as the Thornfield Act, strengthening property rights, increasing oversight of HOA boards, and making it harder for small communities to be manipulated by a few powerful individuals. The act did not stop every abuse, but it changed the incentives. It made corruption riskier and transparency more demanded. Other counties began to follow the same reforms, and the valley's fight became a blueprint. Rex never forgot Sarah, and he never stopped feeling the hollow ache of her absence. But the ranch was no longer a quiet place where grief could grow unchecked. It was a battlefield that had been won, and a sanctuary that had become a source of strength. He understood now that bullies count on decent people accepting abuse. They rely on silence, on exhaustion, on the belief that the law will not help. But when someone pushes too far, when the line is crossed, the same system they thought they controlled can become the instrument of their downfall. In the evenings, Rex would walk the fence line and think of his granddad's hands. He would remember the first time he saw the ranch, the way the sunrise turned the desert into gold. He would remember the foreclosure notice, the cold paper on the gate, and the moment he chose not to surrender. The lesson was simple and brutal. Power does not belong only to those with titles and money. It belongs to anyone who knows how to document the truth, how to stand with evidence, and how to refuse to be erased. And the valley, once silenced, learned to speak again. Marcus Blackwood also paid a price. The nephew who had been used as a pawn went bankrupt, lost his real estate license, and was forced to testify. He admitted Vivian had paid him to cut the fence and that the board rewarded obedience with contracts, favors, and silence. The safety narrative collapsed, and the county reopened every case tied to Sunset Meadows. Several board members were removed, and the HOA was placed under state oversight. The county began auditing other associations, and for the first time in years, homeowners spoke without fear. The valley began healing together, and the story of the Thornfield Ranch became a warning told in town halls and courtrooms. Rex received letters from strangers thanking him for standing up, and the Barty Community Foundation grew into a network of volunteers, investigators, and lawyers who helped those trapped by rules and authority without mercy.